In chapters 4 and 5 of the student activity book, your students are turning themselves into the concept of a citizen scientist. They're doing so by literally collecting experimental data and sharing that in the larger context across the globe. Now, in chapter 4, the form is actually created and the data set is shared by the creators of the book, us. And so we went through the steps that you're going to see here to be able to create the format of collection and the medium through which we would then share the results. However, in chapter 5, your students are asked to create their own experimental design and then in some way advertise through social media or some other format to a larger audience the way by which they are going to collect data to those who replicate that experiment. So Google Drive is a great way to do this. What you'll notice in Google Drive, and this is not going to be a Google 101 or a Google Docs 101, this really is going to be mostly about forms and sharing data. So what you'll see is that I'm already in a Google Drive folder. And inside that folder, you'll see the New button that would be found in any Google Drive account. Under More, there's a Google Forms. Because I already have this shared with the co-author of the activity book, Ben, it's okay that I'm going to continue sharing this because he's the only one that would also have the ability to edit this document. Now, within here, I'm going to go ahead and start the form. So I'm just going to call this form, for simplicity's sake for this training series, data collection. I may add some instructions here. And then I'm down to my questions. Now, you want to make sure to talk with your students about what is it that the data is really going to help reveal by the questions that they are asking of the audience. I'm not really going to be concerned about the names of the people who are submitting the data. And quite frankly, in order to preserve some anonymity, we probably don't want to collect any of the name data. But we could collect the location, and we could even add some help text and define if it's in the United States. I might want their city and their state. If they're in another country, what is the city and the country? So you can decide here what you would define with your students and in helping them. You see that there's also quite a few questions that you would be able to, types that you would be able to provide. And so this is just going to be a simple text, and I'm going to make it a required question. The advanced settings is essentially where we can set parameters that if the respondent doesn't answer using the method that we would want, which isn't the case here because we can't validate that it's an accurate city name or anything like that. But if they don't validate, or if the data doesn't validate that it's an accurate way to represent the information you're collecting, it can provide some error text, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I'm just going to make this simple. I'm going to say, what is the location? And then I'm going to add one more question. You'll notice here I can add an item. And I'm going to say, what was the temperature? Again, this is a real simplistic model. Now, I'm going to make sure that the students understand that this is going to be something that has to be reported in Celsius, okay? And we'll say nearest tenth. Now here's why that's important, okay? Under the validation now, I can determine, or I can say all of the different things that are here. Now obviously it is a number, okay? So that's important, all right? That way we're not having someone put in there spelling out the word 21 degrees or something along those lines. And by it being a number, they're also not using the word degrees. That's important as they're beginning to graph the data, because if units are included in their response, it could actually skew some of the data because your graphing software may not know that it's actually a number if there's text involved. I'm going to make that a required question as well and click Done. Okay, so my form is essentially finished. Now, they could submit another response if we leave this checked. And we could allow them to edit the response. Also, you'll notice here it says your response has been recorded. In this particular case, the response being recorded, they already know that. They click Submit. This is where we may add more details about where to find the results. Now, we don't have that yet, so we may have to come back to this and edit this after we actually provide that location. So The easiest way to share this form is you'll notice at the top and the bottom we now have send form. The beauty of Google Forms is that it allows you to shorten that URL right within Google Forms. So now all I have to do is click on show a short URL, copy, and I can tweet it out. I can send it via an email, or if I have a website, I can post this shortened URL. What we aren't going to go into in this video is if I click the embed button, I can customize the size of the form, copy this code, and if you're familiar with, or if your students are familiar with any of the common web development tools like Wikispaces or PBWiki or Blogger, anywhere that they see the little HTML button in their toolbar, they can click on that, paste that code into the HTML, and it will embed this form right within. Now, there's some other things that aren't really instructional in nature. Your students are probably going to want to change the theme to something that might be more appropriate or fitting. Many of them are not school-centric, but hey, here's a data collection with a lab, so we're going to go ahead and choose that one. And so now we can see exactly what it is that the respondents will see when they submit it. Now, I want to be able to not only share out the form itself, which we've already showed by clicking the send form. Again, we already know how to get the URL. We could embed if we're savvy enough to be able to do that, or share via social media or email. But the other thing that we need to be able to do is share out the responses. This is a little bit trickier. So what's great about Google is it knows, if I go back to that form, look at what it did. It created a spreadsheet, and that's what the icon is in front of this one that says responses, a spreadsheet of all of the responses. So if I go back to my form, I can view those responses, and it's essentially opening up that spreadsheet that I just pointed out inside of that folder. Now, working very similarly to that of how I sent the form, you'll notice there is the big blue share button. If I click share, I'll get a similar type of icon. But here, instead of seeing that shortener right at the top, I have to get the shareable link. Notice it's already set to anyone with this link can view. Now, I will warn you, if you are a Google Apps for Education school district, this may be set to only people in the school district can view, in which case you would need to pull the drop down, say more, and change that to expand the scope. Now, all I have to do is copy the link, and I can share this link out to anyone that I'd like. Now, this is a really long link. Okay, this is not going to be something that's going to be embedded somewhere. I'm going to need to share this data out in some way, perhaps on a website. To do that, I actually use the tool Google, Goo.gl. What Google does, it allows me to paste that long URL and gives me a much shorter one. Notice the preview is here. That's how you know it's working correctly. If I click the details in Goo.gl, here's what's really great. Your students can see how many total visits people from the outside have made to that spreadsheet to see the results, what types of platforms and what types of browsers they've used, but how about this? How many different countries were accessing that data. So they can see if there's a correlation between the countries that are submitting data to the countries who are actually reviewing the data. Look what else it provides, a QR code. So they could take this QR code, and again, if you have that website that you might be embedding this Google form in, you could actually at the end of the spreadsheet have a copy of that picture simply by saving the image or copying the image and pasting that right into your favorite web browser. So this is a quick and easy way to have students not only create a form, share the form out to people who they want to be collecting the data from, but then also taking that spreadsheet of results, sharing it as a view-only document, and then allowing anyone that URL or that QR code is accessed by to see the data and therefore use it. What you may have noticed is that it was set as view only. So what the students then would be able to do is copy that data that are accessing it. they could copy that data and then paste that into their favorite spreadsheet tool. So they could use Google Sheets on their own, or they could use Excel if that's something that they would prefer. So hopefully this gives you a full picture of, from start to finish, creating the folder, creating the form, giving access to both the form and the spreadsheet of results, and doing so through a goo.gol shortener to be able to create this collaborative citizen scientist environment that your students can now begin to share and collaborate with others across the globe.